Today I want to have some fun on ArchiCAD 24 and show you guys exactly how to design a magnitude of different elevations so quickly and so easily. What's going on, guys? My name is Tomic and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about elevation design in ArchiCAD 24. We're simply going to go through a couple different options where we can manipulate and change the front elevation very rapidly without having to change and manipulate the rest of the house. So if that's something that interests you, there's a subscribe button down below, there's a like button down below. I'd appreciate it if you smashed both of them. And down below all of that is a couple of descriptive links as well, which you might be interested in. One in particular is going to be the download link to this ArchiCAD file that we're working on today. It's available through the Patreon Discord link. So if you check out that link down below, you will be able to access everything that I've done today. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's turn around to these screens and get into the tutorial. All right, so because I am located in Australia, I have the Australian Select template available to me. If you guys have your American template or whatever template you have available, just use that one. We're not using anything fancy, it's just the basic template that comes with ArchiCAD 24. Once we have ArchiCAD 24 open and ready to go, we're gonna start this video like we start every single other one. Control 7 opens up our story settings. It's important for me to set up story settings first because it just makes life a hell of a lot easier when you're working on this project later on down the track. So I start with inserting one below and calling it footings, and it is minus 172 for me in particular. I put it 172 because that's the size of a slab and a bit of footings in general, so we don't really have to worry too much. I'm gonna go to the ground floor plan. I'm gonna change that to 2,745, which is a timber frame size. I'm also gonna change the first floor to ground ceiling, which I'm gonna make about 250 millimeters. I'm gonna change the roof to first floor. I'm again gonna make that 2745, and I'm gonna insert one more calling it the first ceiling or the roof. Again, at this point in time, I'm gonna make it about 250 mil. It's probably gonna be about 600 depending on the elevation design we end up going with. But let's untick all of these, click OK, and we're gonna see they all open up on this settings side over here. Going into the ground floor plan, we're gonna start by creating the most basic outline of a house that you can think of. We're not gonna do anything fancy. It's literally gonna be just a couple walls, and we're gonna see how we can manipulate this and change it to a whole bunch of different variations. So let's start with the wall tool, changing the wall layout, making sure it's on external. That's always important for us. And we're gonna change the actual type of wall itself. So if I scroll down to SP03 90mm stud partition, it's just a timber stud wall or a steel frame wall at 90mm. It's probably going to be timber, but it's generic at this point in time. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a very long line. Let's say we have a very long elongated block at 25 meters long. Now to achieve this, all I've done is click once with my wall, hold shift, press the D button and type in 25,000 millimeters. I'll go back another 6,000 millimeters and repeat the process till I create one entire square. So I've got my bottom ground floor of what we're really going to see from the street. We're not worrying about the rest of the house. It's just that front elevation that we can see. So we're just going to see what we can come up with as we progress throughout this video. If I go to the first floor, double click, and then I'm going to right click on ground floor and simply select show as trace reference. So we're going to see that the trace reference appears as a ghost layer underneath. We can change the color as we like. So if we don't like the color that we see, we can make it green, blue, red, purple, whatever you really like and however you feel works best for you. By holding the Alt or Option key, we can actually replicate the wall underneath. So I hold Alt and I click once, and all of a sudden I can start drawing new walls. So I'll click escape because I don't want to draw those walls. I'm thinking of creating some sort of long elongated building. So let's click over here. Let's go all the way across. Let's cantilever it. Let's say we'll cantilever 3 meters for this. We'll run that another 6 meters wide. Holding shift, we make sure it's straight. Clicking once, clicking twice, we finish off that final wall system there. So now we have show all in 3D up the top. We can right click, we can go show all in 3D. we can select this marquee tool, and as long as this black selection or the dark outline selection is shown, clicking once, clicking twice, right click, show only selection in 3D, means we can actually control what we want to see. So as you can see, we've already started to create this elongated shape at the bottom where we can probably put a double garage and entry. Up the top we have our master bedrooms and whatever the floor plan might actually end up being. So right now I can envision this as about 2 or 3 different options very quickly. If I wanted to spend a lot more time on it, you could probably come up with 20 or 30 different elevations on this very simple structure here. So for me personally, I'd probably start by just defining a few spaces. I think over here will be our garage and our carport, or whatever we have, potentially just a sliding gate. Over here we might have some bedrooms. They might not need any windows at the front. They might all be interior facing courtyard windows. It might be a villa style project that we're looking at. So let's say we have the freedom and flexibility to put windows at the front, to not put windows at the front. It really gives us a lot more diversity if it isn't all glazing. So let's jump back to the ground floor and define where we believe our carport should be. So simply collecting the fill tool over here, it doesn't really matter what settings or anything because we're going to delete it in a minute. All I want to do is click once, select the geometric method and press the D button, go tab my way through these dimensions, go 6,000 by 6,000 gives us roughly our garage area. So by clicking on this shape once, clicking Control D and clicking that again, I'm able to move it how I see fit. I'm just going to move it in line with this wall here, and I'm going to right click that first floor, go show as trace reference. So we have quite a large amount of area in between our garage and our floating top floor. I think personally, I'm just going to drag this in a little bit. At the moment, all my walls are grouped. I'm going to hit Alt G to ungroup them, and I'm able to select one wall individually. So clicking once, I'm going to be able to select both of these, click once, click again, and then Control D to move it in as I really want to. So I'm probably going to move it all the way across, Control D again, and hitting the D button allows me to bring it back 1500. I'm just going to push it 1500 back so I can create some sort of entryway here, some way to get into the house. So let's get rid of that. Holding Control allows you to get the scissor tool out. Clicking once just deletes that wall. We don't see it anymore. It's perfect, it's done. Now I'm going to introduce a sliding gate here, and I'm probably going to replace most of this wall with some sort of timber screen. Maybe we do a garden internally underneath so it's all seen from the street. Maybe we manipulate it with some walls and windows. Let's see how we go. So we'll start by simply going into the door tool, clicking on the door. We have a bunch of standard doors, but all I'm looking for in this instance is a sliding door. So now we have an exterior sliding door available from the default ArchiCAD 24 settings. I'm going to change the grids to a HV grid, which allows me to manipulate it to see how I see fit. I'm then also going to click on this icon here, which gives me an elevation view of what I'm looking at. Personally, as you probably know by watching these videos, I hate seeing the orange color. It's just a template thing, but we can open up this floor plan and section detail, click override pen and change our pen to black so it isn't an ugly yellow. Coming back into sliding door details, we can click through once and start manipulating these settings here. So I'm thinking it's going to be a sliding gate for that garage or carport more so, and it's just going to be a timber vertical screen. The simplest way I can do that is by removing this vertical element to 1 and making this 6 meters wide. So let's make that 6 meters wide. Now we have a beautiful wide garage door. We're going to make it 2.4 high. So there's plenty of room for all sorts of cars to clear it. We're going to introduce a 35 millimeter thick bar, and on both width and thickness, it's going to go all the way through the leaf, and we're just going to tap to see how many of those we need. So 20 probably isn't enough, 40 is probably just the right amount. If we go to 45, it might be a little bit too much, it might not. We'll see when we actually put it into the project. And then what we're gonna do is go to Model Attributes, and we're gonna start changing a few bits and pieces here. So to make this a perforated screen, we have to kind of manipulate it a little bit. So let's start by overriding the settings here. I'm fine with it all being pine wood grain because I'm gonna change it in twin motion later down the track anyway. And I'm going to change this glass leaf to air. So changing those settings straight to air, clicking OK, and introducing our sliding door. Now, if I click escape, it's open about 10%. We can change that in our settings if we want to, but it just shows that it's a sliding door. Going back into our 3D, we'll see that the project's changed quite a bit, but we have this nice 3D sliding gate which has perforated screens. Now, if we wanted to, we could go back in, we could change that so it had more vertical bars, it could have less. It's completely up to you guys. Design it however you wish. Door settings, just coming back into that leaf, let's say we want 520. That was definitely accidental, but it makes a solid panel door. Now we go back into it, let's change that to 50. And again, we're back to somewhere where we started. So now I'd probably like the rest of this entire wall to be a similar vertical pattern. So if I come back into the ground floor plan, click on that wall, I've downloaded CI Tools Covering. It's an additional plugin to ArchiCAD, but it is phenomenal and I truly do recommend it. Not sponsored. If you know anybody from ArchiCAD or CI Tools that wants to sponsor it, always happy for a chat. But if we go into this coverings tool and jump across to wall coverings, we have a bunch of options that we can play with. So let's say we want to introduce some boards and bats, which gives us that timber vertical screen. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees like we've seen. If I click it multiple times on this picture, it'll rotate it around so I can see what's going on. I don't think I want 800mm spacing on this B setting, so let's change that to 50. We'll make C 35. And then I'm going to start messing with the rest of the settings. So that's currently what I have it at. I'm going to manipulate it a bit more, see what it looks like when it's finally finished. I've also overwritten the settings here so it matches that garage door. Simply clicking OK and dragging it on the outside of that wall. We're going to see it creates corners, but we're not really worried about that yet. We'll go into more detail later. Now you can see we've created this board and batten pattern, which is vertical, very similar to this sliding gate that we've created. But if I press the M tool for a measuring tool, I can see we only have about an 80mm gap between each of those boards. So if I open up these settings again by clicking Command T, Control T, whichever system you're on, or you can come to this settings dialog box up the top, I'm gonna drop that back down to, it's 80 between, so let's call it 105 there. I also don't want this top and bottom bar, so I'm gonna go all the way across, looking at my square edges. Now we're in horizontal trims. I probably don't want to change it to none. I'll probably just reduce it down to 35 so it finishes that trim really nicely. I'll do 35 there too. And I'll do the same on my bottom of wall base. So 35, 35. Now, if I click OK, we'll see that pattern completely change. There we go. We've started to align with our garage sliding carport. We have this elevation here, all natural timber. And now we can start introducing some windows and then start playing with it some more. Come back to our ground floor plan, clicking on the window tool. Let's just get one really nice, long, skinny window in here. So if we go into window, let's just search window 24. We have window 24 there. So just like the sliding door, I'm gonna override those settings because I hate that orange, it drives me crazy. And then I'm not really gonna mess with anything in here. I'm gonna do it in 3D to see how I like it the best. So let's introduce this small window here and I'm gonna drag it all the way across in line with the edge of that building just for starters. So coming back into 3D, we'll see we've introduced this giant window, which in reality, I'm not really sure what we'll be using this house for. It would potentially be a massive living room, games room. I'm not entirely sure, but it is quite a stunning space. I'm going to reduce that to 600mm. What I'm then going to do is go back to the ground floor plan and just center that perfectly in between this sliding gate and the edge of that wall. So by clicking on that window once, clicking Control D, going all the way across once, coming back to the other side, repeating that same step, Control D, all the way across, 3170 we'll call it. So if I can do quick maths, I think that's approximately 1575 or thereabouts. Don't judge me on my average math skills. Okay, so now we have this beautiful landscape window centered across the whole building. I'll probably go into those settings again, Command T, dropping down to the model attributes, and I'll just change that to metal iron for now. go okay. So it'll give us a black finish rather than just a simple timber one. That's a very long piece of glass, and as beautiful as it is, it would be very challenging to actually manufacture. So we'll go back up to the settings and we'll probably introduce a divider. So we'll go HV grid again. We'll simply go 1 vertical, 4 horizontals, absolutely fine. We'll probably make them silicon joints, so 10 mil, 10 mil, and clicking OK. So now we have a more realistic window that would actually be created. It'll be 4 separate panels of glass instead of 1 giant panel of glass. It's doable, it's 100% doable, it's just super expensive. So now we have the foundation of our first elevation. If I go back into our ground floor plan and click Control, the down arrow, we're gonna go into our footings layer. As you can see, it's changed here. I'm gonna go show as trace reference for the ground floor, and I'm just quickly gonna draw a mesh in. So we have some sort of ground to work with. So site mesh, you can see I've got it as soil. It is a grass texture. I'm then gonna click on the black dot on the edge, subtract from the polygon, and make that about 6 meters wide. That gives us our driveway. Holding my Alt button, again, I can replicate that. Clicking on our mesh, Command T, I'm just gonna change that to concrete. Doesn't really matter which concrete I pick for the moment. So it's more or less just for the simple purposes of giving us an indication of what's going on. I'm going to click Command D while having everything selected and move that up 172 mil. So now we have the beginning of what is going to be quite a nice home. If I scroll back up and go to ground ceiling, right click on ground floor plan, see where our actual floor plan is of the above floor. So what I'm going to do is create the slab tool, get the square because it's a very simple square, zoom into the edge, click once, zoom out, zoom back into the other edge, click another time, and go back to our 3D marquee. So as you can see, I've created that slab, well, I'll call it, for the upper floor. It is too low, so there's a number of ways to change it. You can scroll across, increase that by 250, and then it is a cantilevering concrete slab. I'm also going to just change this in all these settings here to concrete as well. So I'll pick a different concrete than I had before. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. I'll pick 23 again. So now I have concrete 23 as my base. I'm also going to open that up once more and just override all those greens because, again, I hate the colored lines. So there we go. Now we have the beginning of our first elevation. It is very simple. It's the garage at the front, it's a window at there, and it's a cantilevering box basically. We're gonna do a couple more things to make this realistic and to make it work. So what I'll do is I'll go back into the ground floor ceiling plan. I will right click the ground floor plan, go show as trace. Holding the Alt button, I'll draw something inside here. So that'll depict our roof internally. I will then reduce that back to 0 like we originally had, so it hides and disappears. If we're actually talking about this from a construction point of view, if this was going to be a concrete roof, it would be a lot deeper than that. That concrete roof definitely wouldn't have any value in being anything like that. In a real world, we'd probably push that up about 600 and have a concealed roof behind with a 1 to 2 degree pitch instead of having a concrete roof. But we're really just talking about elevations, and we're going to start doing some different roof design in a minute too. So if we were to have just one concrete roof behind here, one concrete slab over the edge here, and then a secondary roof over the top, just to finish off that design, we'll go to ground ceiling, we'll click on that once, Control C, first floor ceiling, Control V, it'll ask you center of current view or original location. We want original location, click OK, and click off away from that spinning dashed line we saw a second ago. Coming back into 3D, now we see we have our building coming together. I am going to change all of these walls into some sort of concrete color for the simple purpose to make it all look exactly the same. So now we have a floating building over the top of our main building down below. and we basically have our first elevation. Now the purposes of this is to be actually able to create a different elevation from this. So let's say this is where you started, this is the project you had, the client came back to you and goes, I don't like the elevation, what can you do for me? Well, elevations are quite simple and you can mess around with them as much as you like to make them really work for you. So what I'm going to do is come back to the ground floor plan, and then I'm going to use the marquee tool and clicking Control L, turning all my layers on. So all layers visible, okay. Marquee that section right there. So I have absolutely everything that I've just created on all levels above and below. If you make sure you have that selection at work, otherwise all your other marquees will really just give you what you're looking at. So I'm going to click Control D and Control once more to replicate. And then I'm actually going to click Control and Alt to be able to replicate it multiple times. Now I'm going to type in 60,000, which is going to give us one identical copy of that. And now I'm going to type in 120,000 to move that once more further away. So if we go back into our 3Ds, we'll see if I zoom out a little bit and right click, go show all in 3D, because that is now my new selection. You can see I have 3 copies of that identical project. So now we have this first basic kind of luxury but very minimalistic timber frame concrete look house. And we have our secondary house that looks identical that we're going to completely manipulate and see what we can come up with. So the easiest way to give elevation a different look is by simply changing the roof lines. The roof lines can go from flat to pitched to mono-pitched to Cillian to, I don't know, hamptons to gables to all sorts of ideas very, very, very quickly. So let's say we are looking at a pitched roof design, potentially with a gable end on this side here. So let's just hit that one, delete, go to our roof ceiling, show our first floor as our trace reference, going to our roof tool. I'm going to make sure I have single plane geometry selected and clicking once on this outside edge, holding shift to make sure it's straight, clicking on the inside edge where we want the roof to go, centering it, lining it up, drawing my first square to finish off my first roof, clicking on that roof section, Control or Command M mirrors it, and then Control gives you a duplicate. So holding shift, now we have a duplicate of that there. As you can see, my roof has already been created quite quickly, quite easily, and it's at a 22-degree pitch. If I wanted to change that, make it 25, we have a weird church looking situation here, bringing that back down to 30, changes it once more. Now all my walls are grouped. I'm going to simply click Alt G to ungroup them, selecting just that wall, clicking on one of these top nodes, clicking height adjust and moving it up. Now if I select both that wall and the roof itself, I can right click, connect, trim to roof shell, trim. And there we go, that's gone, beautiful, disappeared. What I think we need now is some sort of window to actually emphasize the beauty of that roof and how it has been designed. What I'll do is click on both those, go to CI tools, covering, roof covering. Again, fantastic tool that you can download off the internet. It is a little bit expensive, but it's definitely worth the price. And let's change this to a corrugated roof for no other reason than corrugated roofs are what Australia uses most. Now, because I'm not going into it in this video, I'm just going to change these roof battens, clicking on this user defined and moving that down to 90, just to hide that from view so we don't see it anymore. It's a bit ugly anyway, so we don't really want to see it. In a different video, I actually talked about how we can create a wraparound black Maxline looking cladding, which is ultra modern, ultra minimalistic and sleek. I will quickly just duplicate those settings in this project here. If you want to go back and check out that video, I will link it down below, link it in this video. I'll do my best to remember. If not, you're looking for a really modern black gable end roof thumbnail. Now remember, everything that I do in this video will be available through the Patreon Discord link. So if you want to go ahead and check out that link down below to be able to get this file, to be able to use it however you see fit, which means you'll get access to these CI tools, one-time use only. You can't really manipulate them, change them because you don't have an ID for them, but you can see the tools, how they work. you can see the roof structure, how I've created it, you can see the Maxline cladding, and you can just generally play around with the project itself. You can take it into Twinmotion, you can render it out. Again, it's basically your file to do whatever you wish with it. Okay, so what I've gone ahead and done is replicated that Maxline cladding that I was talking about in a previous project. Hopefully I've linked it in this video. I will do my best to put a little info card so you can check out how we created this Maxline cladding. It is exactly the same process as we created these boards down below. It's just a different series of settings. So if I open this up and give you these settings here, take a quick screenshot. It is exactly those settings, and you can create this beautiful metal cladding that wraps up into your secret gutter roof. That roof is slightly different. So if we come back into the roof design, and if you want to screenshot this as well, you can match it perfectly like for like. So again, screenshot that, I'll leave it there for a second. Okay, that's all the time. You can go back if you need to. So now we have this beautiful pitched gable roof floating over our bottom timber floor. I think we definitely need a window on this elevation, like I said before. So let's go back into our first floor. You can see this roof shell, I don't like it. So I'm just gonna turn it off because it's too hard to see with it on. So shell, tick, okay. Let's just move that to that actual roof shell layer so it disappears. There we go, now we can see our walls again. If I come into our window tool, go window, we can use window 24 just like we did before. Centering it there, we're gonna start creating our first window. So we're definitely gonna want that to be significantly bigger. Let's say it's roughly 4 meters, 300 wide. We're gonna do the same thing we did downstairs, centering it, clicking across, Command D, finding the center, 1700, half 1700, 1850. And we have our first window. What we're also going to do is quickly replicate that window by clicking on it once, clicking Control gives us a duplicate, going back into settings and changing it to a triangle window 24. I'm not going to mess around with this just yet, clicking OK very quickly, very simply, dragging it across to match our window and going back into 3D to see what kind of mess we've made. So we've got our triangle window down the bottom, clicking on that, Control D, moving it all the way up. Now we have our pitched gable triangle window. I still don't like that. That's probably the wrong shape. So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And I'm also going to change the settings of this triangle window. So going into the triangle window and just tapping through these settings to see what we need to change. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory. Most of it's pretty fine. We will change the actual color. Let's change that to paint black. Black glass is fine. Model attributes, reveal, all of that is pretty much okay. And then simply clicking OK. What we do want to change is the height to try and match our gable roof. Now I usually use 4D library, so you can match it a little bit better, a little bit easier. So I'm just going to manually go through this to try and figure out where we need to be. So 1400 by 4.3 pretty bang on. I'm going to drag it that little bit higher up. So let's say it sits at 2.6. And then I'm going to connect this window to the triangle window as well. Okay, so we have our window dragged up. I'm going to go into these settings and just simply make it black like we did to the last one. All simple, done. I'm going to add a HV grid to this one as well because it just doesn't look aesthetically pleasing as one giant panel. So horizontal 1, horizontal 2, vertical 1 in this case. And we're going to make it 100 by 100. Let's make it a big chunky thick one. Clicking OK. We're going to do the same thing for this triangle window up the top. So same way, going into sash options, grid, HV grid, 2, 1, 1, 2, sorry, my mistake, 100, 100, OK. There we go. One more error. Going into those settings, going back to our model attributes, we can see that all of these didn't change automatically like they do on most windows. So we'll just quickly change them. And there we go. We have our second elevation done rapidly. Now, more than likely, you wouldn't keep a flat roof down below because it's just too expensive. So what I'd actually do is now create a secondary roof here. So let's cut that off. Let's go to ground ceiling. We're going to activate our roof and right click ground floor, show as trace reference. Same way we did with the upper floor, except we're stopping in line with the floor above. We know exactly where it is because we have that slab on that same floor. I don't know where the center is perfectly for this one, but that's okay. So I finished it early. Clicking on this once, clicking Control M and then clicking Control allows us to hold Shift, click a couple times and replicate that. So if I was to drag it all the way to the edge of this wall, I can now hold Control whilst one of these roofs are selected, click on the other one and do the same to automatically merge them to where they need to be. Now what I can do is click on both, Control D, Control again to duplicate, and clicking on one of the edges to offset that all the way across. Now we have our chunky thick roof again. That doesn't really work with what we're looking for, so I'm gonna hold Alt and Control to replicate those settings for the roof there at the end. Now again, we can drag up these walls, click the to roof and connect if we need to. Depends on the elevation we're really messing with. So it can be seen, it can be not seen. It doesn't really matter too much. Just depends how you want to go about it. Now, there are actually timber roofs out there that you can create and you can use. They are super expensive, hard to come by. Not many people use them because they're a bit of a maintenance issue, they're a bit of a fire issue. There's all sorts of problems and dilemmas with it. But it's a render, it's an elevation design. So what I'm actually going to do is select all of these, go to my roof coverings and actually use this one here to replicate what we did below. If I change the settings something to like this, clicking OK, we might get pretty close, we might not, I'm not 100% certain, but we do get a timber looking ribbed roof. Now that isn't perfect, it's not exactly what it should be. I'll also select these two roofs here, change them to wood and click OK so they disappear a bit better. We're not going into the details of how we actually model a timber roof in this video. I'll go into that another video down the track. But there's our second elevation done very rapidly. So as you can see, if I scroll out, zoom out, we have this very kind of boring box, I guess if you want to call it. And then we have our more kind of barn looking elevation. Again, nothing fancy, nothing amazing, but let's spend a little bit more time on this next elevation to try and get a little bit more quirky with it. So we still have our third elevation, which is a replica of our first, over on this side here. Now, personally, I've got 1,000,001 ideas of how we can create this to make it something interesting, to make it something powerful, to make it something amazing. We could spend hours on this third elevation, but we probably won't spend that long. So I'll try get the fundamental ideas out as quickly as possible to really try and manipulate this form so we can create something quite special. So if this was going to be a multi-million-dollar house, it would have landscaped gardens, it would have a beautiful driveway, it wouldn't just be grass and concrete, there would be a lot more detail in it. If you do actually download this PLN file, most likely I would have done that to create the thumbnail for this photo, so you'll get the bonus added extra grass details here. But if we're going to create some sort of luxury architectural home, there'd be some strong concrete elements into this design. There'd be a lot more architectural windows happening. There would be cantilevered awnings, there would be boxed out windows, there would just be a lot more detail. So let's start with the ground floor plan and introduce a few more elements into this garage. So let's go ground ceiling and move across to our third item in question. I want to actually extend this concrete roof here. So what I'm going to do is make that 6'6" by 500. Then I'm going to create a 250 by 500 section on this side here as well. So if we go back into 3D, you'll see I've created two multiples of that, and then I'm going to increase the thickness all the way to the ground. So now we have some sort of concrete awning around this roof. I'm going to make it a lot deeper. Let's make it another 500. Let's do the same for this side here. So we're just clicking on the blue square, extending it. We have our first concrete box around the side. It gives us some sort of indication that this is our entry portal. That's where we're going to. I'll probably actually duplicate that on this side. So I'm going to run through this very quickly. Like I said before, I'm not really going to go into too much detail of how I do everything. You're just going to see more of my workflow and architectural process. If we go to the first floor now, I'm going to introduce a corner window right here. So I'm gonna go to my windows, window 24 is absolutely fine. As you know, we can mess with it, we can play with it. So let's extend that to that large. Go to the settings, change our corner settings, clicking OK on a custom 90 corner, mirroring that because it's the wrong way around, lining it up, duplicating it, and extending it a little bit further. So we come back into 3D. We have this very large window here. I don't like how long it is. I'm gonna make it about that and about there. So it's very linear, very narrow. We're gonna center it somewhere about here. And then I'm just gonna simply change the colors to black. There we go, we have a nice skinny black window around that side. What I'm gonna do is go back into the first floor plan, click on my slab tool and simply draw a 300 millimeter box around it. So bear with me because this will all make sense in a second. I'm only gonna make that 10 millimeters thick, and going into our floor 3D, you'll see that I've created a slab. I'm gonna drag that up there, I'm gonna drag that up there, boxing it out, giving it that architectural profile, making it black, same as the window there. And then very similar to how we just created that edge for the garage, we're gonna create a secondary edge right here for this boxed out window frame. So there we go, I've now just duplicated this beautiful black fin across. I'm quite liking that. So as we progress, I'll group all of these items together, move them up. Let's move one here, and I'm going to duplicate a second one here. So now we have two of these black razor sharp fins coming off the side of this building, which looks really, really nice. I'm not liking this in a concrete look, so I'm going to change that. Let's change it to some sort of white texture. So let's just paint it a white-ish color for now. I'm actually going to change that cladding completely to a black monument. So I'm going to steal that Maxline cladding from the previous project, clicking on that to duplicate it very rapidly, very quickly, changing that gate color as well. Now we have our black sliding gate with our contrasting white awning. I don't think I need that side at all. I don't like that. I don't love it at all. I'm going to extend this to see how this quickly looks all the way across there. And I'm going to line it up with the edge of this window just so we have something to line it up to. Cantilevering, now we have this linear line all the way through. What I'm going to do is introduce the secondary elements. So duplicating this edge near the window, dropping it down significantly to the top of that window, and replicating our top feature, dragging that back to the edge of the other window. So now we're just talking about vertical linear lines. We probably don't need that to go that far. Let's bring it back. We have some sort of architectural feature in there. We desperately need some sort of front door in here. That's just clearly obvious. So let's go back to our ground floor plan. Doors, external door, door 24. We'll probably just make that a H door as well. We'll probably just make no grid. Doesn't really matter just yet. We'll see how it looks and how we interpret it once we put it into our 3D model. If you can't already tell, I design very much so in 3D. I like to see it, I like to visualize it, and then I progress as the design progresses. So there we go, we have this perfect space for that door right there. It's a little bit small. I'm going to increase the size of that to the same size as the garage, which means it becomes 2.4 high and sits just under our nice architectural wraparound features here. So this would probably be some sort of precast paneling with a proper concrete roof on the top. So if this were a proper concrete roof and we really were getting into the nitty-gritty of it, we'd have some sort of beautiful garden on top of here and another one on top. So let's quickly create that. Going into our ceiling, I'm gonna use any old wall. I'm gonna make it 500 tall. I'm gonna offset it a little bit. I'm not really too worried about what I'm offsetting. So there we go. We have that one, we have this one. If I select all them, duplicate them quickly, drag them in there, slice them in half, get rid of those, delete those, go back to my 3D. We'll see we have this little concrete plinth that's created above. So going into our mesh tool and just simply drawing a little bit of earth in there. If I drag that up, and let's just change that to just a stone granite gray, duplicating that on that side, and let's just drop that 50 mil. So in reality, what it would be a flat concrete roof, a little bit of an upstand on this side, and then there would be pedals, waterproofing, all sorts of different layers to be able to actually get that concrete roof working, which means you can utilize that as a beautiful green space. It means the plants and flowers can overlap the house if you want them to. Very common in humid climates, very common in general with the concrete roof. We'll actually replicate the same thing on our ceiling. Now, the higher up you get, if you're standing on the ground and looking up at the building, you probably would only see this one here. You wouldn't see the top one, but it depends how you designed it, if you wanted those plans to cascade down or not. It really up to you, any way, shape or form. But generically, that is the third alternative elevation design we can manufacture from a very simple basic design. It is literally two boxes stacked on top of each other. It is nothing special whatsoever, but it just shows us the freedom and luxury that we have by introducing different architectural elements. So we can change our style of windows, we can introduce window boxes, we can change our roof pitches, we can introduce concrete roofs and design them properly. We can introduce box outs around our windows that actually create sun shading. We can then manipulate the colors, the scheme. We're introducing new doors, new openings. We actually have so much possibility to change one design into a million different ones. That's all for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you leave a comment down below. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, how I can improve these videos, or simply just what you want to see in the future. If you wouldn't also mind hitting the subscribe button and also the like button to help this channel grow, as it's been growing tremendously well by you guys supporting the channel over the past couple of months. There's nothing further from me, so like always, I will see you next Monday.